You probably think you've heard this video before. I'm just going to be another angry longtime Pokemon fan raging at the sky claiming Pokemon games are too easy, pointing back to the experience share as a way the new generation has gone soft. Back in my day we had to earn our experience in battle. Right? Well, if you had asked me a few years ago, yeah, that was pretty much where I was. However, I've given up that fight. The new experience share is here to stay. I don't think Pokemon is ever going back, and honestly, I'm fine with that. In fact, my only complaint about the experience share itself in Legends ZA is that it doesn't actually give enough experience. I'm serious. I think it should give experience to fainted Pokemon in your party as well, since the fainted Pokemon usually participated in the battle and are often your Pokemon that need experience the most. I remember battling the Rogue Mega Tyranitar with my Mega Heracross, doing like 95% of its health in an instant before it fainted, then not getting any experience when my Meganium finished it off. That felt wrong to me. The experience share as it stands actively punishes Pokemon for battling and fainting, while rewarding Pokemon that don't battle. Still, this is a minor complaint. I think the experience share itself is a perfectly reasonable system. Unfortunately, the games around the experience share are broken. The games are not, and never have been, designed around this method of experience. Game design that was good in the first 5 generations became bad game design in generations 6 through 9. Game Freak has never actually addressed this problem, leading to a significantly worse early and mid-game experience for players. In the first 5 generations, training a team of 6 Pokemon is hard, and the NPCs help tell that story. As an example, let's take a look at the trainers in Route 117 in Hoenn. We have a couple of trainers with level 18 Doduos, a trainer with 3 level 15 Pokemon, and a couple of Pokemon breeders who have 6 level 12 Pokemon. This tells a story and teaches the player. The more Pokemon a team has, the harder it is to train each one. The triathletes are pretty easy to counter because even though they have a high level, they only have 1 Pokemon. The breeders are also pretty easy to curve stomp because even though they have a lot of Pokemon, each one is really weak and you can probably one-shot them. Bug Maniac Derek is the strongest trainer in this bunch. Despite not having the highest levels or the most Pokemon, he has more than 1 Pokemon and the fully evolved bugs are a high enough level to be at least a little scary. At this point in the game, the player follows the same logic as the NPCs. If you actively try to train a lot of Pokemon, every Pokemon will be at a lower level, but you might have more flexibility to gain good type matchups. If you only train 1 Pokemon, you'll be able to absolutely stomp most fights, but you also run into a higher risk of getting walled by specific counters. Generally speaking, levels are stronger in the early game, while type diversity is more important in the late game. Stat-wise, the percentage jumps in stats are much greater in the early game than the late game. For example, a Bulbasaur at level 10 with Tackle wins every time against a level 5 Pidgey with Gust. If you change that to a level 100 Bulbasaur against a level 95 Pidgey with the same moves, the Pidgey wins despite the level disadvantage. Pokemon also gain massive power spikes through new moves and evolutions more often in the early game than the late game. Basically, fighting underleveled is easier in the late game than the early game, so before the experience share, the most intuitive way to play a game was to only train a couple of Pokemon early, then add more Pokemon to your party over time. Even in Gen 1, Game Freak understood this fact, and we see this in gym leader design. In the original Red and Blue games, Brock and Misty both have 2 Pokemon, Surge and Erica have 3 Pokemon, Koga, Sabrina, and Blaine have 4, Giovanni and the Elite Four have 5 Mon, and the Champion has 6. Your rival in these games has a similar progression, as pretty much every time you see him, he's caught another Pokemon and added it to his team, which is likely to mirror your progression with how many Pokemon you are actively training at the time. Average trainers may have more or less Pokemon, but the trainers who matter approximately match how many Pokemon you should be training at any given moment. This is good game design. Pokemon doesn't always match this formula, but in the first 5 generations, when they stray from it, they usually have a reason. Gen 2, for instance, varies up the number of Pokemon in Gym Leader's teams a lot more than Gen 1 does. Whitney has 2 Pokemon after Bugsy has 3, but I'd argue that Whitney's Miltank is such a difficulty spike that it's actually more memorable because of it. It's like the game is warning you not to judge a trainer by the number of Pokemon they have, but instead by Pokemon quality. While this works for Whitney, it works less well for Chuck and Price, who definitely could use more Pokemon and better teams. Gen 3 also does something very similar with Tate and Liza, who have fewer Pokemon than Winona in every version. Despite this, they're still arguably the strongest gym leaders in the game because of a massive level spike combined with them being a double battle. Black and White also somewhat departs from this formula, having the first 2 gyms be 2 Mon, every other gym being 3 Pokemon, and the Elite Four being 4. With N and Ghetsis having 6 Pokemon, no trainer in Gen 5 actually has 5 Pokemon, which is weird. I don't know how to explain that, and I think the game could have been improved by giving a few gym leaders 4 Pokemon and the Elite Four 5 Pokemon. That said, the same progression system applies here, and it makes sense. As trainers in the game get harder, they're able to put in the time to train more Pokemon, which makes them tougher opponents. Then, we get into the experience share era, where Game Freak's game design stayed consistent. Gen 6, 7, 8, and 9 all follow this formula near perfectly, with later game bosses having more Pokemon. The number of Pokemon per gym leader in XY is directly copied from Black and White. Gen 7 is its own thing with kahunas instead of gym leaders, but the same principles apply. Then, Sword pretty much copies the original Gen 1 games in terms of amount of Pokemon per leader. Gen 9 varies it up slightly, giving Iono 4 Pokemon when everyone else around her has 3, but keeps the formula intact. Legends ZA doesn't do gym battles, but essentially does the same thing with its trainer bosses, having the player fight larger teams in the late game. So, if this was good game design before, why do I think it's bad game design now? Well, before the EXP share, increasing your team size came at a cost, one that's much harsher in the early game than the later game. With the EXP share giving your entire team experience, that's just no longer the case, so a player will always have 6 capable Pokemon on their team. In previous generations, it made sense to train a team of 2 or 3 Pokemon in the early game, so when a boss only trained 2 or 3 Pokemon, that made sense too. Now, when there's no opportunity cost to training 6 Pokemon, that is just not the case, and every single battle in the first 2/3 of the game has the player at a distinct advantage just because you can train 6 Pokemon, and everyone else just doesn't. More than anything Pokemon has done recently, this massive disconnect has made me feel like I'm winning due to everyone else in the universe being dumb instead of me being smart. There is no in-universe justification of why I'm able to train 6 Pokemon while everyone else doesn't. You could argue that this is just the player's superpower, that only a few trainers are capable of training lots of Pokemon, but that doesn't hold up to me. Nobody ever mentions this unfairness in the dialogue, at least. To me, this feels like Game Freak is using past game designs while upgrading to new systems without seeing the disconnect between them. Being able to have more Pokemon than my opponents at the same levels makes the early game stupidly easy, in a way that doesn't feel earned to me. The most obvious way to fix this is to revert the experience share back to what it used to be, but as I said earlier, I don't know if this is the best solution. Having your entire party gain experience can be super nice. As someone who hates grinding on wild Pokemon, I do not miss trying to add a new underleveled party member to my team and feeling pain as it saps the rest of my party's experience gain. The experience share can also reward swapping between team members, which can add more fun playstyles. It also makes it easier to train more stally Pokemon which specialize in facing bosses, but have a harder time leveling up against more standard trainers. It's also just simply more interesting to fight with a team of 6 powerful Pokemon than a single overpowered Pokemon, so encouraging that should create more fun battles. There are benefits here, and I'd like to find a way to build a game around the experience share instead of abandoning the experiment entirely. There are plenty of other games that use some sort of experience all system and make it work just fine. Expedition 33, my personal pick for Game of the Year, has the entire party gain experience every battle, with your active party members gaining more than your reserve members. Chained Echoes does experience even better in my opinion, with your entire party leveling up at the same rate at specific moments in the story. This lets the player experiment with formations at will without worrying about who's getting experience, which feels absolutely incredible. Chained Echoes' combat system is honestly amazing, and its experience system is designed intentionally with the rest of the game in mind. Seeing this type of system work in other games makes me want to find a more creative solution than just turning the XP share off. Still, what's the best way to do that? In Chained Echoes and Expedition 33, you fight against monsters instead of other trainers, so there's no in-story reason that should specify how many monsters you're fighting in any given battle. In Pokemon, trainers are intentionally holding back to follow League-sanctioned battle rules, so unequal or unfair battles are possible, which is what feels wrong to me. One solution to the narrative inconsistency is just to make dramatic changes to the opposing teams, giving every single NPC in the game 6 Pokemon after the first couple routes. This would make sense narratively. Every serious trainer should have 6 Pokemon, but I think that would hurt the gameplay. Trainer battles would become a lot more tedious, and boss trainers would feel a lot less special. You'd also probably have to drastically decrease the number of trainers in the game to prevent the game from becoming boring, which would hurt the narrative. Quite frankly, this solution feels extreme, and I don't like it. Getting a bit more creative, we could take a solution from VGC in the anime that I think could be very interesting. Imagine a game where every trainer is 6 Pokemon, but the battles aren't all 6v6. In this game, the player sees an opposing 6 Pokemon before the battle begins, and has to choose 3 Pokemon to fight in a friendly 3v3 battle. Then, once the battle begins, you and your opponent have a fair match where you both can only use the 3 Pokemon you've chosen. This would allow players to lose battles without blacking out, which I think could be very interesting. This system could also create differences between friendly battles and evil team fights, or maybe the evil team doesn't battle under this system, allowing you to go all out against them. Later game battles would still be allowed to use more Pokemon, and training more types would still be encouraged, because it would give you more options to battle with. Another way this system could work would be allowing the player to keep more Pokemon in their party as they get more gym badges. Under this system, the player would only start with 2 or 3 slots in their party, and would slowly unlock 6 as the game goes on. I used this system when I Nuzlocked Sword in this channel a while back, and honestly, it felt great. This neutered the power of the EXP share early on, while still being able to reap its benefits, making the level curve of this game genuinely fantastic. When I didn't have a Pokemon advantage on each trainer, I needed to think a lot more about my strategy and had a lot of genuinely terrifying moments, all while never needing to grind on wild Pokemon. Story-wise, this also makes sense, because training 6 Pokemon should be harder than training 1 or 2 Pokemon. Once I got more gym badges, I became a better trainer, and I was able to handle bigger teams, which explains why some trainers are able to train more Pokemon than others. There's also potential in combining these systems. Imagine a world where the amount of Pokemon a trainer carried was determined by the amount of gym badges they had, and every league-sanctioned battle was a fair battle where both competitors can only use the same number of Pokemon. If the player had 4 Pokemon and an NPC has 2 Pokemon, that player chooses 2 Pokemon to battle the NPC. If the player has 3 Pokemon and the NPC has 5, then the NPC should choose 3 Pokemon to fight the player with. Interestingly, this is almost exactly how the anime handles Pokemon battles. Before battles begin, the contestants, or sometimes a referee, will state that participants are going to have access to a certain number of Pokemon. For example, they might have a 3v3 battle or a 1v1 battle, and transferring this system to the games would keep the games interesting while providing a lot of storytelling opportunities. Under this system, a trainer's power level would usually be reflected by the amount of Pokemon they carry, but it leaves the game open to playing with these systems to tell more stories. Imagine youngster Timmy on an early route going, "My dad gave me this awesome Pokemon, it's gonna be you for sure!" Timmy has 2 Pokemon, a level 5 Rattata and a level 30 Haunter, and he wants to battle you 2v2. However, even though your Pokemon are lower than level 20, you can still win that battle because he uses random moves, and the Haunter disobeys him. The story from this battle is that even though Timmy has an overleveled Pokemon, he hasn't beaten a gym yet because he's an inexperienced trainer. Alternatively, imagine Elite Four Janet meeting you in an optional battle. When you see her have 5 Pokemon to your 3, it's scary, but then she offers you a deal to use 1 Pokemon against you in a triple battle. The story here is that this Elite Four member sees potential in you and wants to test you, but she's also holding back to give you a chance to win. On long routes, this system could tell more stories by slowly reducing the number of opposing Pokemon on enemy teams deep in the route. Near the city, opposing trainers' spirits are high and their Pokemon are healthy, so they challenge you to 3v3 or even 4v4 battles. At the end of the cave, though, trainers are exhausted and their Pokemon have fainted, so hikers might challenge you to a 1v1 battle instead. The story told through the gameplay would be, this route is longer than trainers expect it to be, and the NPCs struggle to traverse it. To reflect the trainer's strength, most trainers would probably have the same number of Pokemon as the player, or 1 less than the player. The evil team of this region can still have small amounts of Pokemon to reflect their lack of badges, and you can engage them in unfair fights because these battles aren't league sanctioned. But eventually, they respond by combining their teams together and challenging you to double battles against multiple opponents at once. If there's one takeaway I want you to get from this, it's that changing one aspect of a game without thinking about how it would change the other parts of the game is a recipe for a narrative disaster. For the last 4 generations, Pokemon has been designing games with an experience share that makes raising a full party easy, while using game design that tells the story of it being hard to raise lots of Pokemon at once. Pokemon never updated their game design to account for the experience share, and player experience suffered for it. If Pokemon could redesign their games around the experience share, the games could feel so much better and tell significantly better stories through its gameplay. In the comments, I'm curious whether you agree with me about this being a problem, and how you would fix it if you were in charge of the games. My goal here is to start a discussion that's a bit more nuanced than, is this good or bad? And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.